Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another cool week of astrology with me, Haunted Cerebral. Hope everyone's been doing well and had a nice week with that ingress of Mars into Cancer. I'd be interested to hear how that's been going for everyone. Yeah, so I'm just going to try and get right into it so that we can save ourselves some time, but just want to thank everyone for liking, watching, subscribing, commenting, and everything. It really means a lot. Every little bit goes a long way. And if you want to book a consultation with me, or you want to donate to help me with my work, all the links are in the description box. So yeah, that's it. So might as well just get right into the astrology this week. So here's the transits for this week. Mostly a lot of lunar stuff, but of course the big thing happening this week is the Scorpio full moon, which is going to be tonight into Tuesday morning in Berlin, in the Central European time zone. So let's just take that down, and then we can just get right into it. Hold on, I'm gonna update my screen so that it's, yeah, that should be better. All right, so let's get into it. So today, April 26th, Monday, April 26th. Wait a second. Yeah, okay. So kind of this morning, so I'm kind of doing this in the afternoon here, but there was a number of things that happened this morning. So might as well just go back to when the day really started. So hold on. So last night into this morning, Mercury conjoined with Venus. And so we're kind of waking up from the residuals of that conjunction. So maybe thoughts and communications are a little bit more playful. Maybe we had some more like playful, sensual, maybe pleasure-based dreams on some level. Maybe we're thinking more rational about how we're going to want the things that we want and the things that we want to get pleasure from, how we're going to do that and figure out some of the things we want from those things. So our thoughts are kind of more focused on those, and maybe we're communicating, sending out more messages about wanting more playfulness in our lives, wanting more sensuality, wanting more love in our friendships and things like that, maybe expressing our love for our friendships on some level. But we have to remember that Saturn is still squaring both planets at this time. It's still in a degree-based square. I mean, both planets are separating, so they're kind of moving away from that, but sometimes the manifestations of aspects can happen during the separations. So we're kind of maybe even looking forward to some of our responsibilities. Maybe we woke up this morning and there's things that we had to do, or things that we've set, tasks that we've set for ourselves, but on some level we kind of like want to do them. We're like, oh yeah, I really want to do this thing, even though it's not an easy thing, or it's a part of my work. And it's like being like, wow, I kind of like work right now on some level. So that's kind of cool. And on some, maybe there's some deals coming in. Maybe we want to make deals right now. Maybe a deal came to us, and we're kind of like being more executive in our deals and being able to execute them on some level more easily, and maybe in a more generally agreeable manner. So maybe in a deal even presents itself, and it could be a good time to like take a deal rather than thinking about it too much. If it seems if it seems a bit risky, maybe just going for the deal anyways, working with it in some level. But, priorities are about to shift. So it's ideal to try to use this energy while it's available this morning. All right, so I'm going to move the clock forward here. So the moon is moving through Libra right now. So kind of our emotions are kind of focused more on relationship. And it's kind of interesting. So now we're getting closer to the real time. The moon kind of makes this hard aspect to Pluto. So it's kind of picking up on maybe some of our fears about some of our relationships, some of our diplomatic agreements we're making with others, some of the ways that we're trying to find peace and trying to maybe bring more balance into our lives on some level. And we're kind of like, okay, there's things I want to do. There's responsibilities. I am enjoying them. I am making some like deals that I like on some level, but there's that kind of like sense of fear of like, oh, maybe something will go wrong. And maybe there's a tension that comes up there. But at the same time, the moon is also moving into an exact trine with Jupiter, which was literally 1 hour later perfects. So even though there's this square with Pluto, it's like an hour later, it trines with Jupiter. So it's kind of like picking up on some of this intensity with Pluto. The moon's getting also closer and closer to entering Scorpio, which is where, so a lot of people, like I've been noticing just waking up this morning, a lot of people have already noticed how full the moon is this time, more than usual. And I think with the moon going into Scorpio, it's going to be entering its fall. People are going to be feeling this full moon, I think, more than normal. It's like one of the full moons in the year where it's really quite pronounced. So so moon's been picking up on this intensity as it's getting closer to the full moon, getting close to Scorpio. Then on top, squares with Pluto. So there's like this kind of, there's a bit of wanting to release. There's a powerful yet cryptic sense in our relationships on some level, like something unseen that we're feeling. There's like a sixth sense about it that we're getting closer to feeling on some level. And there's also this like kind of strong urge to release some sort of pent up energies that we're having. On one level, there's this like tension, but then the moon moves into this trine with Jupiter. And then all of a sudden there's also this like possibilities to make something happen with that tension. It's like, oh, I want to make this deal. But I'm like afraid of it. But then at the same time, then you're like, oh, what? I think this is going to really work out. And so still there's like a hopeful sense to everything, like everything's going to be all right. But then there's like this kind of combination sense of danger, but then we also have faith. So it's like, it's kind of flipping back and forth to one and the other. And at the same time, the moon really just wants to find some balance right now. So there could be some indecisions about that. But at the same time, we've kind of like taken a deal, gone with it. And now we're kind of in the heat. We're getting closer to what that could mean kind of in a way. So it's looking like some things are going to go really well, even though there's still some uncertainty, but we can trust that there's a plan. And this is good. This is a good thing. There's like consensus on some level and an overall thumbs up to relationships and to deals in general. So the messages that we're going to be sending out, the messages that we're going to be communicating will be agreeable, and they'll also be easily digested, since the moon represents our digestion and things that we're consuming, right? So so that's kind of a nice turn to the afternoon, and maybe the morning was a bit like rocky and uneasy on some level. Like for me, I know that like Mercury entering Cancer yesterday, I went on this 20-kilometer walk with a friend of mine who's a Cancer rising too, and like it was just killing me. Actually, I didn't say much, I kept it under the radar, but it was killing me, and he was just like totally powering through it. And this morning I'm really feeling it, so it's kind of funny. Okay, so then the moon moves forward, and then in the afternoon, evening, actually here in Germany, moon moves into Scorpio. So full moon vibes are in effect now. This is a big energy shift, especially for the moon. The moon is also pretty much within like, I think, an hour or two. So by the later evening, the moon also moves into this trine with Mars, and on top they're in mutual reception. So that's kind of interesting, and I'll kind of break that down in a bit. But generally when the moon enters Scorpio, there's a little bit more paranoia, there's a bit of a lack of stability. Like there's a sense that like things, the floor is going to be pulled from underneath us at any moment. So there's this kind of like sense that things may be falling away, or we might lose control a little bit. And that's why when the moon's in Scorpio, there's a little bit more paranoia. There's a little bit more emotional impulsiveness and a bit of recklessness, maybe hostility and volatility that kind of gets agitated on some level, because we're so afraid of losing what we have that maybe we react in ways that we're not typically used to on some level. The moon is technically in fall in Scorpio as well. And basically, I kind of talked about what fall depression means a bit last week. But when a planet is in its fall, it's going to be more susceptible to falling in circumstantial issues that come up. It's not going to be able to see always the pitfalls of certain situations that come up. It may just have more misfortunes as it comes to some of its typical functionality. So as a planet is going to want to signify and express certain ways, it's like has natural significations. Those natural significations are almost going to be like the total flip, like not total flip opposite. That's more like exile detriment. But in like fall, it's like being the planet being in its natural way could lead it to mishaps, could lead it to misfortunes, could lead it to getting into situations that really bring it down, depress it. They call it depression also. So moon is in fall in Scorpio. Of course, this happens once a month. It's not a big deal. But the moon is also it's forming a full moon now. So the usual emotional pitfalls are now going to be really seen. They'll be more pronounced than normal. But this is also somehow a good thing, because on one level, when the moon typically goes through Scorpio, maybe we don't always see some of these pitfalls. We just fall into them. And then we're like, oh God, now I got to get out of this thing again. But on this level, because the moon is really illuminated now, we'll be able to see some of the pitfalls, and maybe we can dodge the bullet on some level. So the moon then, of course, like I mentioned, it goes into this trine with Mars this evening, 26, Monday evening. So so now the moon is in Mars's sign, moon is in Mars's sign, Mars is in the moon sign. On top, moon is in its fall, Mars is in its fall. So there's a weird mutual reception here happening. Mutual receptions in general are a chance for collaboration, mutual support, and chance for improving some sort of sticky situation. And I think in this level, sticky situation is the best describer, because it's like, it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't for both the planets. And yet, or like maybe they dodge a bullet on one end and then they fall into a pit on the other. And in this end, it's like they both are able to know that they're in these precarious situations. So somehow they're communicating in a supportive way. They're adding each other's testimonies to each other's situations, and being able to like be a bit more communicative as while the moon is in Scorpio. Maybe Mars can be a bit more like, okay, well, watch out for this. And now while Mars is in Cancer, the moon can be like, okay, well, watch out for that. So there's a bit more healthy conversation between these two archetypes. So there is like a kind of a sense that these two areas of our lives will be able to contribute and thus support us on some level in this process. So that kind of carries through basically the whole evening. And so I'm just going to move the moon forward to the next day, to Tuesday. So now we're on Tuesday. I'm just going to move the moon right to the full moon. So the moon makes that full moon at around 6:21 in the morning. Actually, I'm going to bring up a full moon chart here, so we can actually even just look at full moon chart. So it's very context specific. I'll even bring up the ascendant midheaven. So this is the full moon chart for Berlin, Germany. It's going to go exact at 5:31 a.m. in Berlin. The moon will be going, it will be an Aries ascendant, Aries rising chart. So that means not only is it a Mars ruled full moon, it's also in Berlin, it's a Mars ruled like initiation, beginning, birth of some kind. So, and Mars is in detriment in the fourth house. And it's kind of like on top, it's in this very covert, underground, maybe more emotionally sensed way. And then on top, it's in the 4th house of unseen things, right? So this full moon is not, like I said, it's not really something extraordinary or unique because, you know, Scorpio full moon, first of all, happens once a year and full moons happen every month. But this one's a bit tricky, and I'm going to try and break that down a bit just because the moon's in its fall and the ruler of the moon is also in its fall. But what do full moons really mean? In general, they're like a building up, they're a culmination, they're a release of some kind. This is the point where the moon has kind of come to the halfway point between the next new moon, which is the next new beginning, and the next new moon, or the last new moon, which was something we began to from the last point. So wherever you have Aries in your chart, that's going to be where some new beginning emerged in the last 2 weeks. And this is kind of a culminating point in that process. So now we can kind of see where things are working and where things are not working. We have a bit more clarity on those things. So it's a culmination, but because it's in Scorpio, it's a bit more sensitive, perhaps even defensive on some level. So really, maybe a lot of people have been noticing in the last 2 weeks, especially in the last week as the moon's been building up to that full moon, just been dealing with our feelings in general. And as the moon peaks tomorrow morning, Tuesday 27th, tomorrow morning, this is like the peak of that emotional buildup. And like basically the next 2 weeks, and especially this week, is going to be about dealing with the repercussions of that explosion on some levels. So yeah, hypervigilance in general, just because it's the Scorpio full moon, but this for some may be a triggering point. So you want to look at where in your chart the full moon is going to be going exact on. So whatever, especially within a conjunction or an opposition, and I would also include square on some level, you know, what in your chart, your natal chart, is the moon going to be within, I would say, at least like minimum 3 to 5 degree orb, making this full moon perfection at. So on top, we have to remember there's this big stellium in Taurus as well, just as the full moon goes exact. So there's kind of it's kind of a tense full moon, and it's also highlighting because it's a fixed sign. And probably all of the lunar transits for the moon in Scorpio this year, and while Saturn remains in Aquarius, and also I would say while Uranus remains in Taurus, probably the full moon, the lunar transits through Scorpio are going to be the most intense ones, just because it's the fixed sign that's bringing up these tensions again. And on top, the moon is in its fall. So it's kind of bringing back and highlighting this tension again with Saturn in Uranus. So kind of look at where in your chart that's been going up. And it's going to be this thing that's going to move forward whatever the story has been in 2021 so far for you and also the world in general. So that's something to pay attention to, see how that's unfolding for you in your chart, and you know, take note of these things, to be observant. So the moon, like I said, it's also in this, it's still technically by sign, it's also trine with Mars. So there is this kind of enabling energy to it all. It might be easier to fall in pit. It's like almost like the moon is like, oh, Mars will be like, oh, maybe you want to watch out for this pit here, but then the moon in Scorpio is like, I kind of want to do it. And it just like maybe jumps into problems that it could have otherwise avoided, but just wants to make sudden decisions and like do it. Maybe it like gets off on it on some level. So if we're telling ourselves, hey, maybe this feels good, and then we do it, and then something not so good comes out of it, you know, what does that say about our feelings right now? Can we really trust what we're feeling right now? It's hard to say. But why, you know, is the moon in fall in Scorpio? Well, because, you know, the moon is generally going to be more sensitive about things. It wants to kind of do things that are more like bringing things together, nest things together, carry things apart. While like Scorpio, it's this Mars sign about like severing and destroying and just purging things, like washing them away, kind of away, vibrations. So they're not really like they're not really it's not really a place where the moon functions so well. But like, how is this good for both the moon and Mars while they're both in fall? Well, like I said before, there's some sort of conversation, healthy conversation going on between them. At least they know some of the things that's going on with each other, and maybe they can talk about it. They can get to the core of some issue that has of yet not been talked about. Maybe it's like a difficult conversation. It's like telling your parents that the way they treated you as a child really left you traumatized for your whole life, kind of thing. Like, that's just one example, but that's the kind of vibe it's going to be going down. So look at where the full moon's happening in your chart, and that may actually even be where some sort of conversation needs to be had in your life. So in this chart, it's in the 8th house. Maybe it's about your finances. Maybe it's about your partner's finances. Maybe it's about a death in the family. Maybe it's about getting into debts of some kind, or having to deal with karmic debts that have come from maybe past behaviors that now you have to deal with. So yeah, so think about that. How is this a great time to use that Scorpio energy? Scorpio energy is all about, there's something about Scorpio that's like about purging. It's like seeing the problem and seeing that like the solution is actually to cut it out and throw it away. So see what weak points and see where there's the soft spots, and maybe determine, is this something I need to prod, or is this something I need to protect? I need to defend on some level. So this could be an instinctual knowing without having to really understand the situation, but having an emotional sense about it. There'll be a very touchiness, a very like prickliness in the skin on some level. It's like that day where your hands just don't feel good. Everything you touch feels like off on some level. And this may just heighten our susceptibility to knowing something without knowing why. So yeah, it's like kind of knowing if something's really hot. Like normally if something's really hot or cold, we have to touch it to know that. But it's like having the sense like, okay, I think that might burn me. And it's like, I think that is just too cold. It's like too cold outside, even though the weather network maybe tells us it's a nice day, so to speak. So in general, I would say that this is kind of a triggering full moon. Something probably is going to go down on some level, if it's going to be in your life or in a more mundane sense. It's hard to say. Is it going to be you that triggers it, or is it going to be somebody else? Depends on where it is in your chart. You have to look it up and see how some of the things that have been going on in your year so far, how they apply to this kind of buildup of tension that's been going on in the last week or two. It's kind of like, this kind of weird, and I'm kind of digging more into this full moon in general, just because it is the highlight of the week, but it's kind of like one of these like damned if you don't, damned if you do sort of decision-making processes. Whatever you do might have some sort of negative consequence to it. So do we act with integrity and principle, even if it's like something we don't like, or do we act out? Or do we act in? So it's like, do we act out to make somebody else feel a way that we want them to feel, or do we act in because, maybe we're punishing ourselves on some level? So where can we apply our principles? Where can we apply our integrity in order to come out of this without totally destroying something that maybe we value on some level? Choice is ours, as always, but it's not going to be easy to make. There's going to be barriers. There's going to be some fear. It's a time to try to respond rather than react. So, the problem sometimes is like, if we don't take that moment before we get into a problem, we give ourselves that time to kind of process what's happened. Maybe we turn a situation that's already kind of challenging into a more of a problem already. So that's the thing about, with words too. It's like once they come out of our mouth, we can't just pull them back and put them back in our mouths. Like once things are said, once things are done, they're already done, they're already said. We can't just take them back. So that's something to consider during this full moon. So I'm going to move back to the real time. All right. Get rid of that ACMC. All right, so moving forward, what's going on that day? Yeah, so the moon then moves also, once it moves out of the full moon, it moves then into a opposition with Uranus, probably going to shake things up a bit. It's kind of like, shit got serious. It's kind of like shit got intense. then shit gets kind of like demolished on some level, and then kind of the moon then moves into this hard square with Saturn. So later that afternoon, the moon then perfects this square. Oh, hold on. Let's get to the perfected square. There. Moon moves into this perfected square with Saturn. And it's kind of like, you know, all that releasing, all that culmination of that Scorpio energy that's been going on through the last 24 hours. It just makes it more difficult now with Saturn being in Aquarius. Like I said before, probably all these lunar transits through Scorpio are going to be the most difficult while Saturn remains in Aquarius. And it's very kind of like fuck it energy. It's like, you know, there's a potential for us hitting like a hard edge or hitting a brick wall on some level. And rather than being like, okay, why did I hit this brick wall? Just being like, you know, this is your problem, not mine. And, you know, letting others maybe either hitting an hard edge on some level, or letting others know that you have a hard edge and they have to witness it. So there is also this kind of misanthropic vibes. It's like, I hate me, I hate the whole world kind of thing. But maybe it's also like something for us to stop ourselves. And we also maybe don't have to like it, but it's stopping us anyway. So, you know, we can either give it the finger, or we can allow this obstacle to teach us on some level, which is what Saturn is always trying to do. It's like, it's giving us problems, challenges, obstacles, delays, limitations in order to teach us something. And that's part of why a lot of people don't like Saturn. It's like, why does this bloody planet always want to teach me something? Some people would even call this like lower power and compared to higher power, which is arguably true. But Saturn, at the end of the day, you know, all the planets are divine forces. And at the end of the day, Saturn is trying to help us. If it's something that's really challenging for us, if it's fear bringing, if it's isolating, causing, all these kinds of things, separating us from our loved ones on some level, there could be something that we have to learn through that. And even if we don't want to, and Saturn's also slow. So, you know, if there's something that that's been delaying us through this whole year, maybe, you know, we haven't been able to see our families for years. Maybe we're trying to plan a wedding, which we can't really do because there's so many complications with COVID and everything. And Saturn's like telling us to slow down. And it's like, why is it telling us to slow down? And that's kind of maybe that we have an opportunity with this lunar square after some emotional intensity to be hit with that brick wall again, that things are not going according to plan all the time. Just because we will it doesn't mean it just happens. So what is it that we're being taught? Moon is still technically full. As long as the moon is going to be remaining in Scorpio here, moon is still technically full. So this is a time actually to let go of shit, let go of things that's not working, right? Right. So I also think this is a bit of a funny one too. Not only is, so let's move the clock forward a little bit too, because later then we see that the moon actually forms a opposition to this really dope Venus Mercury conjunction, which, you know, everybody woke up on Monday being like, yeah, I want to do the thing that is hard. And like, it's like the context is really great right now. But on the same level, we're also like dealing with something really intense on some level. So it's a bit of a funny situation. There's some weird contrasting going on. It's like, even though there's this big emotional storm, this Venus Mercury combination is like this beautiful background scene. It's like almost like being on vacation somewhere totally beautiful, having great conversations over food and luxuries of all these kinds. But then there's this like big drama going on some level. And it's just a totally weird contrast between like the context and the content. And maybe this is where we have to kind of surrender to the facts and try to observe a little bit more. And maybe this is like not a difficult thing to do, but whatever's happening is happening from this kind of better perspective too. It's like, maybe things are not going like, they're not perfect, but maybe there's been a lot of progress. Maybe we're just in a much better place today than we were a year ago or 6 months ago. You know, when was the last time there was a Scorpio full moon? A full year ago. We're in a totally different place probably. So, and in a better place. And sometimes we just need that better perspective to actually like see that. So, you know, there is a chance to have a better perspective because we have a lot more resources now. We have a lot more tools with Mercury and Venus. We have a lot more ways of finding solutions. So it's a new experience probably for everyone. Everyone's probably in a place right now in their lives where they've never been there before. So it's kind of like, even though it's been leading up to this for some time, it's probably happening now for a reason. So in that kind of observable way, you know, it's not something right now is not something to be terrified by or crippled with fear because of. But of course, the sooner we deal with whatever problems we have, the better, the sooner that solutions will present themselves. So that was about a long time talking about Tuesday. So let's move forward to Wednesday. So Wednesday, not too much going on. I think the moon is still in Scorpio. Let's see. First big thing that kind of goes on is that trine to Neptune. And so there's a bit, it could be, you know, this is happening in the middle of the night. So the moon's starting to kind of pick up on this fantasies we're having, maybe where you have Neptune in your chart, maybe fantasies about your relationships, fantasies about your career, fantasies about enemies or home or family or things like that. And so the moon's kind of picking up on that, but maybe there's just a bit too much fantasy going on. We're thinking we know better, but maybe, you know, because the moon is in a fixed sign, it's in a sensitive, emotionally defensive, protective fixed sign right now. So perhaps we're getting a bit too caught up in our opinions, or maybe the opinions in general are a bit too caught up in their own sides of things. And it could be that we're a bit lost in that fantasy about where our echo chamber of opinion exists. And, you know, it's kind of like fixed and somehow obsessed a little bit on that perspective. So maybe our dreams are getting caught up in that conversation as well. All right, so I'm going to move it forward again. Moon, as in the morning, the moon picks up on the sextile to Pluto. So maybe there's a bit more like harmony going on between some of the things that we've been having some fears about, or wanting to purge on some level, or to release. And maybe in that early morning, around noontime, we're able to connect with that thing and release it in a positive way. Okay, so gonna move the moon forward. Right, and then it moves basically just like that trine earlier in the week. The moon then moves into a square with Jupiter. So this kind of suggests, again, these fixed positions, maybe on our beliefs in general. Nobody's really willing to change their position in general. The Jupiter in Aquarius is very like, everything's going to be okay in the future. And maybe people aren't agreeing with each other now, but in the future, everybody's going to be together on this. We're all going to be living you know, the age of Aquarius one day on some level. And then the moon in Scorpio is just like, no, we're not. It's like, have you actually turned on the news recently? The world is doomed on some level. So there's like two different pages going on here, and it's a little bit stubborn. Maybe everyone's on different pages. So yeah, one's really loose and maybe one's a little bit more hostile on some level. But then later in that day, the moon changes signs into a Jupiter sign. So it goes into Sagittarius, a little bit more hopefulness. So the moon's now picking up on a new vibrations, maybe where once one position was fixed on this misanthropic, a little bit more hostile position. Now it's a little bit open to change. It's a little bit open to seeing the other side of things, a little bit more optimistic, redemptive side of things. So the remaining of the afternoon could be spent and that like contemplation of the different perspective, having a little bit more faith. We might even at this point a little bit emotionally taxed and exhausted on some level. Our energy, our bodies, since the moon represents our bodies might be a little bit drained because of all that buildup that's been going on from that full moon. And now we can kind of maybe redeem ourselves on some level if we have to say the thing we had to say, just to say sorry if we had to, or say that, we did something wrong. So it's a chance to get a better perspective after losing ourselves a little bit. I would even see this as like kind of an emotional hangover period, especially moving on into Thursday. So let's move on into Thursday. And the first thing I really want to point out is when the moon conjoins with the south node here. So moon is conjoining with the south node about the same time that it makes a sextile to Saturn. So in general, it's not really a big day, astrologically speaking. But once the moon conjoins with the south nodes, so now we're really kind of distancing ourselves. We're detangling ourselves a bit from the reality of what has gone on in the last few days. So this is kind of like the last time. Also, I want to point out that something interesting about this conjunction to the south node is this will actually be the last time the moon conjoins the south node before before eclipse season starts. So something about the moon going over the south node in Sagittarius now, wherever that is in your chart, about that detangling, that distancing of some level, emotionally or physically. This is kind of part of the eclipses that have been going on, especially since last year into this year. So it's a good thing to pay attention to on some level, but generally when the moon does conjoin the south node, there is this kind of like wanting, especially with Sagittarius, which is this very expansive and kind of like bit more maverick type of sign. It wants to kind of like go its own way. It has like such an enthusiasm about its own way that there could be this kind of like, okay, I gotta like take a hike. Maybe some people just run away from their problems right now, so to speak, and maybe they have to because they're just totally emotionally drained. And like I said, this can be like wanting to let go, wanting to detach. Somehow it's related, like I said, to this emotional hangover vibes on some level. It's got this very 12th house kind of Saturnian vibration to it, separating ourselves from others, seeking solace, seeking solitary places to recover, and kind of losing control over our capacities on some level to deal with the challenging emotional events that have gone on over the last days. So here's our kind of chance to really contemplate, to do something, to initiate, to get to a place where we can kind of contemplate all that's kind of occurred up until this point. Likewise, with the moon sextiling Saturn, it kind of emphasizes this as too. Saturn's the planet of mystical contemplation on some level. So this could be a chance for us to even though maybe something kind of intense has gone on or emotionally taxing in the last 72 hours, this is kind of where we start to recover a little bit. We start to escape a little bit. We start to detach ourselves, detangle ourselves, separate ourselves, start to distance ourselves, maybe in like on some level, like an emotional ostracization. And even though we're really tired, now we have this chance to contemplate and maybe to learn whatever it is we need to learn. Sometimes I think of the moon, and I'll get into this a bit, the moon is like that process of understanding. So as the moon is moving through the conjunction with the south node and sextiling with Saturn in Sagittarius in general, I think most, like as the moon's in Sagittarius overall, this is going to be the time when we're really tired. We're kind of waning out from this emotional energy that's been used up. And maybe it's a time for us to get emo if we want to get emo, and to learn something out of that. Let our bodies do the learning rather than our minds, so to speak. So yeah, if you need to listen to some new metal or emo music, today is the day, kind of thing. All right, so that's kind of it for Thursday. I'm going to move on into Friday. So the first kind of thing I want to point out is that exact sextile. So this is going to happen in the middle of the night here in Berlin, Germany, but there's that exact sextile with Mercury here. So I'll just kind of highlight that. So Neptune and Mercury, they move into exact sextile. So generally kind of a reflective, dreamy state on some level. Maybe this might get even enhanced because of the sextile with Mercury and Neptune. It's almost like our rational minds and our dreams are more conscious and able to kind of decipher some of the symbolic language that's going on in our unconscious. it's kind of like, putting representation to the on non-representational. Like when I think about like Rothko paintings, it's like total non-representation, but it's being represented. So like, what does that mean, kind of thing? So it's kind of like giving. Also, I think that this is also like the moon is also moving into as that sextile kind of perfect. At the same time, the moon is approaching an exact square to Neptune there. So it's like there's two ways of the mind that are working out here, and this is all in the middle of the night. Could be like waking up and having a realization. And on one level, it's like our understanding intelligence versus our reasoning intelligence. So kind of one of the images I had in my mind is kind of like when an infant child wakes up, it's all worked up, it's all upset, it's having a tantrum on some level. And it's trying to like figure out some solution for itself. And maybe that solution so far has been about getting its emotional needs met by another. But then it's kind of like on top, it's like maybe this is also the chance for, that we can realize that like if our emotional needs are always being met by external sources, then we're never really going to be able to take that agency we need for ourselves. And I think like also without our needs being met and facing these challenges of life, we never get to, like learn something for ourselves. We never get to have that personal sense of catharsis and agency that comes up because we weren't able to get our needs met in that exact moment. We had to go through the process of learning how to do it ourselves. So there is this like chance for our personal capacities and our emotional availability to become kind of in a weird dreamlike state between each other that I think could also be about how do we have, like how much energy. I'm kind of tangling myself up here, talking about Neptune, obviously. But I think it's like on this one level, remember the moon is still in Sagittarius. So it's just kind of like drained, right? It just went over the south node. So it's just drained. And on the other level, there's like wanting to get our needs met and having this kind of rational fantasy, figuring out all these fantasies at the same time, and then having to figure out how to get our needs met on our own, and having maybe a chance and maybe being given the chance to do it on our own and learn. And maybe on two levels, it's like we learn something and those who usually gave us something learn something too, if that makes any sense at all. But anyway, I think at this point, we'll probably be at this very emotionally taxed level. And we have to remember that, the body, our emotional, like think of the battery of our emotions and our concentration needs to rise up again later, and that's going to happen later. And so right now we kind of have to be aware of that we're at a more of a declining period as the moon has moved past the full moon. Now it's in a waning phase, right? So like I said, our reasoning mind and our emotional intelligence are on two separate pages. Mercury is like knowing how to figure this out, while the moon is pretty much spent. The moon's just like dead. And at this point, it's kind of like we may come to that point where we realize that like there's a big difference between knowing and understanding. And I like to think of the moon as the understanding mind and Mercury more as the knowing mind. So just because you know something doesn't really mean you understand it. And they talk a lot about this in Zen too. Like for instance, with the Koan Mu, of course, you can understand that like all things are connected and there is no differentiation. Discerning mind, discriminating mind is an illusion. But like, how do you really understand that? And it's not until you have an enlightenment that you can actually be in that state. So they talk a lot about this in Zen philosophy. So I'm not going to get too into that now because we still have some more stuff to go through. But yeah, I thought that I would point that out. And, in this case, Mercury is also still in Taurus. So Mercury is just wanting to figure things out in a very simplistic way, more agreeable way. It's like seeing this fantasy, but like just like turning the amorphous like blob into the triangle. And that's just like enough. while like the moon is kind of like ready to just give up on figuring it out. And that's actually the point where you can get to where you actually hit enlightenment on that level too. It's where you give up, right? You just drop away and have total surrender. So yeah, gonna let that one settle for everybody's minds a little bit. Okay, and then on top, let's move forward. The clock moved forward. Now we move into the daytime. So the moon's still going through Sagittarius, and then let's see. At some point, the moon moves into Capricorn. So now that there's a big energy, there's a vibe shift. The moon's a bit more detached. The moon's a bit more cold, a bit more focused on goal-oriented and ambitious. It doesn't want to deal with this feeling stuff anymore. It's like, okay, now is not the time. And as that happens, that evening. So wait, we're still on the 30th grid. Okay, so because I messed up last week where I was blending days together and I just didn't want to do that this week. So now, as we get to the end of Friday, the sun conjoins with Uranus there. So I'm not going to dig this one up too much, but it's kind of interesting. You know, we can think about Uranus as being the kind of the emancipator, the rebellion impulse on some level. It has this very Promethean, which Richard Tarnas explains as being in Cosmos and Psyche. It talks about it as being this Promethean impulse. And so now the sun, which is kind of like the, you know, it's the spirit, it's the hero, it's the journey of the story of our lives. It's meeting up with that. And so on this level, it's like the hero on some level is the kind of the light stealer. You know, if you think about Prometheus, it's like, even though Prometheus stole the light from the gods and had to face the repercussions of that, on some level, it was also a hero to the people, right? Gave us this knowledge of fire. So on one level, there's this like potential to be the solution, you know, be the bringer of fire, be the bringer of new knowledge on some level. But then there's also the chance for kind of reaching too far, kind of like Icarus's wings melting. Or, you know, it could also be the flip. It could also be the flip, because Uranus is also this flipper. We can't predict things. It's a bit of a wild card. And so it could either be, on one level, Icarus's wings melting, or Leonardo inventing the helicopter like hundreds and hundreds of years before it was even invented. I don't know if anybody saw these pictures, because they tested the first helicopter on Mars, I think, last week. And I saw somebody actually made a correlation between the design of this Mars rover helicopter and the old drawings and models that Leonardo da Vinci made of these early helicopters during the Renaissance. And they look the same. It's totally crazy. And this is that kind of vibration of, like, you know, the sun, which is like in Greco language, we call the sun was Apollo or Helios, and Apollo was the god of foresight, right? And so is our invention of something about thinking into the future, or is it about just getting too close to the sun? So that's kind of what I wanted to point out with that. All right, so let's go forward onto May 1st. So I'm going to open it up first with that opposition to Mars. So this happens like literally in the middle of the night. People were going out that night. They're really going to feel this one too. So now the moon is in its fall, and Mars is in its fall. So they're kind of like coming at a new vibe now since the full moon. This is like one player is like wanting to play the game, and the other player is just like done playing. It's just like, I'm off work. I'm not playing this game anymore. It's not on me. Get the hell out of my business. Moon is basically at this point of just like total separation, detachment on cost. Sometimes, you know, this is Friday night here in Berlin. So, you know, Capricorn is also the sign of perversion on some level, or the sign of, you know, kind of how can I say, like wanting to abandon all like emotional attachment on some level, wanting to just do the thing because it wants to get it done. So there's a very like deterministic perspective of it. It's actually the exaltation of Mars. So Mars is really exalted there because when Mars gets like honed in by those Saturnian barriers, it's able to be really determined with its actions, and it can, rather than just like impulsively do something, it's like a decision or a inception that it makes, kind of has that long lasting ability of it. Okay, so now, you know, like I said, now they're in their fall from each other. It's like they've flipped the coin again. And so, you know, moon is basically at this point total separation. Maybe if people got in some argument during the full moon, and maybe the Martian person is like, I want to talk about it, let's work it out. And the moon person is just like, fuck no. It's like, I'm out here having a good time. This is not like what I want to deal with. So it's like Mars is like bothering, and the moon for all this emotional support. The moon is just like, yo, this is not my problem, actually. So perhaps now is actually not the best time to react or respond in any level. And if you are going to respond, maybe this is like kind of like one of those situations where the best action is inaction, I would say. So like take a minute if you need to, get the fresh air if you need to, take a walk if you need to, come back to the situation later. If you guys are out together on some level, then maybe go to a different party if there's one going on. That's just or maybe go home. Sometimes, you know, like that's something I realized too at some point, is like, you can always just go home. You know, you don't have to be a part of it. So no one's in their zone right now. The hostilities are emerging in ways that are kind of actually counter to the usual story. Expect things to just be different in general. Stable people or unstable people, et cetera, et cetera. Uranus and Taurus square Saturn. It's like very Uranus, Taurus, square Saturn kind of vibes right now. It's really bringing that kind of issues up. Maybe it's okay not to throw salt in the wounds, is what I mean. And you know, it's an opportunity for us to practice the opposite. If what has worked in the past isn't working anymore, then that just means things are different now, and that things have changed. And so, you know, it's kind of like, you know, with drugs, for instance, it's like sometimes the drugs work until they don't, right? So at that point, we have to make a change. And if we don't, then, you know, we're hammering the nail into the board, but we've been up until this point using like a wrench and it's been working, but now it's not working. And it's like, oh, okay, well, we have to use a different tool. So there's a chance here to change. There is some support from other stable places, but maybe things are just a bit weird right now. So we have to try and like understand them later. And I say that just because even though the moon makes that opposition, later in the day, the moon then moves into that trine with the sun, and this kind of leads actually into Sunday as well, when we really have a chance to kind of like recuperate from this really intense week. If it's been intense for some people, there'll be a chance to recuperate from that, I think, later on Saturday afternoon into Sunday. So as you can see right here, the moon just it just perfected that trine with Uranus. So it's kind of picking up on some of the innovations of the practical. Some of like, it's like sometimes like, you know, the simplest way is the best way. And maybe it's one of those things where it's like, you know, maybe your whole life has been totally reckless and maverick-like, and now it's like, oh, I just want things to be stable. And that you could be like picking up on that, and like how to use the tools you have in order to innovate, in order to get more stable, get more grounded with things, be a bit more in the pleasure zones, and be a bit more comfortable, you know. So into Saturday, and then the moon moves into that trine with the sun. So our story, so the stories kind of the circumstances in the story of our lives are a bit more back on track again, a bit more stable. We don't have to try and understand them anymore. They are being more understandable. And that's kind of like basically the vibe that the moon is carrying over through the rest of the day, if that's kind of like the support that people needed. And then that kind of moves us on into Sunday. So like I said, I think Sunday in general is a chance to process the events of this past week. It's a chance to get a new sense of direction and really to know where we're going to go next. Overall, I think it's really like an easy day. Let's see, let's move into probably one of the nicer things going on. Yeah, Mercury is also going to be forming a trine with Pluto as well later in the day. Let's see, yeah, and Moon moves into that sextile. There we go. Moon moves into a sextile with Neptune. Pluto's moving into, Mercury moves into the trine with Pluto, which then the Moon picks up on later. So it is like an interesting day. I think overall it could be a productive day. It's kind of a day to get onto our own pages as well as the pages of others. Venus is also applying to the sextile to Neptune as well. So not only is the pleasure-seeking planet connecting to this like fantasy, dreamy, bubbly, squishy part of our charts right now, but also the Moon is also picking up. So our needs are being met from something that's a bit more fantasy driven, like on some level. It's like almost like our fantasies are fulfilling us, and that's like kind of cool. It's like the things that we dream about are things that are like kind of meeting our needs now, and that has maybe even yummy qualities to it. Maybe this is a good day to like, you know, get into the cuddle puddle on some level. So yeah, it's been a weird week, and I'm gonna kind of close up the transits this week too with this, but you know, it's been a weird week. It's been a weird week. Still, it ends with this kind of chance to get back on track. So although there's been some weirdness to things, there is a chance to kind of learn something out of it and to get more on solid ground again, because it's usually through those like obstacles and those challenges and those free fall moments that when we do find solid ground, we have a better sense of what makes it solid, what makes it more a place where we can draw resources from, right? Like in general, like I said, it's been a bit of a week of landmines. So we really need to move forward by watching our steps as we proceed. It's been one of those weeks where even like if we retreat, we step on a landmine and it blows up. So I think really with this Saturday leading into Sunday, it's like a chance for us to kind of like get a better perspective on the landmine field in general. You know, knowing that if we go backwards here, it's like, it's not going to work. If we go forwards here, it's not going to work. So what does it mean to go sideways, right? Or how do we go lateral? And I think that's really what's going to be going on through most of the day as the Moon kind of goes through and picks up on those yummy aspects with everything in Taurus until it moves into Aquarius on early Monday morning. And that's where I'm going to kind of close up this week. But basically next week's all about the build up to the eclipse season. We also are going to have the Mercury and the Sun square with Jupiter and Pluto. You know, so basically with Mercury and Saturn, it's like what you're saying is going against what others are believing or attaching themselves even to. And then Venus also squares the Jupiter, and then Venus actually moves into Gemini. So it's going to be it's going to be a big energy shift next week. And that's kind of it for this week. So that's it for the astrology this week. I want to thank everyone again for staying tuned. If you want to just jump around, check out this. If you've seen this video already and you want to like kind of follow it through the week and just go be like, okay, well, what's going on again on Tuesday? What's going on Wednesday? I'm going to timestamp things. So just check out the description box and you can kind of flip around in the days as you need to. Use this as a resource for navigating through your week. And that's it. And I really want to thank everybody for continuing to tune in and supporting my channel, supporting my work. I really appreciate it. And everything goes a really long way. And yeah, thanks again. Wishing you all a beautiful week and take care. Bye.